Hi everyone, today we're going to make this shawl. It's an eyelet stitch pattern, so it gives this lacy effect. And we're making it on my addi Kingsize, which has 46 pins. Here's my pattern, worked out on Excel. So I've marked off 46 columns and then just a X amount of rows so that I can see what the pattern's going to look like. So the yellow blocks is where we're going to manipulate the stitches to give the eyelet look, those holy pattern. And this is how I've calculated I'm going to do it. So I'm skipping 5 stitches in between each so that every third row I can alternate into that gap. So we're going to start by casting on some waste yarn, 5 or 6 or 10 rows, whatever you're comfortable with. Just keeps the edge nice and neat and tidy and gives us somewhere to crochet in a border later. Standard cast on method, just take your yarn, wrap it around every second pin relatively loosely. You don't want to hurt your machine until you get back to the beginning. And then you just cast on your rows. I like working opposite the black needles. So those are my 3 needles that I'm starting, that don't knit. As you know, you always have to leave 3 needles open when you're in panel mode. So I start directly opposite the 3 black needles, pins. The reason for that is so that the row counter calculates in both directions, because the row counters count at the black needles. So I start there at pin number 1 and I move across for 43 pins. Obviously 46 minus 3 is 43 pins. So the row counter will count both directions. So it helps me keep track of my rows. As you can see here, this is what we're going to end up with, this lovely little lace pattern with the eyelets alternating every second row in a different position, because we have those 5 pin gaps in between each. So what I've done is I've divided the machine into blocks of 5, excluding the first 3 pins and the last 3 pins. That's where my borders are going to be for stitching later and having an edge. So the first 3 pins and the last 3 pins, nothing happens. I leave them out of my pattern. After that, we've got pin 6, pin 12, pin 18, pin 24, pin 30, and pin 36. Those are the ones that I'm going to manipulate on the first time around. Then we're going to have 3 rows in between. And then on the next set, we're going to do pin 9, pin 15, pin 21, pin 27, pin 33, and pin 39. So that's basically my pattern. And then we knit 1 row back just to close off that hole, and then 2 more rows just to give a bit of a space. So every time I've done one set of manipulation, I knit 3 rows, and then we do the next set of manipulation. So to make it easy for myself, I've taken this whiteboard marker for the simple reason that it comes off easily. I'm not going to permanently ruin my machine. And I just mark those pins. I mark every 5th pin and then alternating every 5th pin to know exactly where I'm going to be manipulating the stitch. It's actually quite easy once you get going, because you can use the rows you've done before as a guideline of where you're going to be next. So as I can see, those rows correspond upwards. So I know exactly where my next holes are going to be. So those holes I've done already in my last row. So in my next row, I need to look for the next holes down, because they're going to be corresponding to the row I'm going to do next. So as soon as one of those holes comes up, I know where to start. Okay, so let's get to it. So what you're going to do is you're going to start advancing your machine in the direction that you're traveling. Doesn't matter left or right. You can do this technique in either direction. So I'm going to move along until I see my black marker pop up. And there it is. I know it's corresponding to the hole below it, because that's the previous lot that I've done. So this next row must correspond to that row. So when I see that hole, I see that black marker, and I know this is the stitch I'm going to manipulate. So So all we do is we remove the stitch from the pin. You definitely need a loom pick for this method. I don't think you can do it with anything else. So if you don't have a loom pick, rush out and get yourself one. It's in any case an investment to make for your addi and centro and for doing these kinds of stitches and manipulations. Also helps with dropped and tucked stitches. So there I see my next black marker corresponding to the hole beneath. So all I need to do is lift up that stitch, pick it up off the pin, and I'm going to move it to the pin next door, the one that's busy coming up. The very next one, I'm going to hook it on. So that one now has 2 loops on it. Make sure that it goes down over the red teeth, and we carry on knitting. So there you're going to see now where I've lifted it, there's nothing, there's no stitch at all over the red teeth. On the next one that I've moved it onto, there are the 2 loops. So we're going to carry on, advance the machine. I see the hole coming up, I see my black marker. I know that's my next one that I need to move. So I insert my loom pick, I grab the yarn, I pull it up over the pin, and I move it to the very next peg that's busy coming up. I hook it over that peg, make sure you push it all the way down so that it goes over the red teeth, and you move on to the next one. There I see my next marker coming up. I know that's the next one I need to do. So I insert my loom pick again, I grab the yarn, pull it up over the pin, and I move it over to the pin that's just busy coming up, push it down over the red teeth, and I carry on. And that's actually quite simple. That's all we're going to do. So that's the stitch manipulation. So each time that your marker comes along, you remove the yarn from the peg that corresponds to your marker, however you want your pattern, and then you just move it over onto the next pin that's coming along, that's going to be lifting up. If you're doing it in the other direction, obviously you need to look at the pin to your right and not this one to the left. As you can see here, sometimes it's a little bit tricky. There I've split the yarn a bit, so make sure you don't do that. Make sure that your yarn is in one piece, that you haven't split it, and when you put it on, make sure it's tucked all the way down. So now I'm going to move along the very last one in my row, and I'm going to move this one over the pin. In total, I only have 6 to do each row. So it's actually a really simple pattern, for me at least, on this one. So there's only 6 manipulations every 4th row. So it's actually quite easy, and it actually goes quite quickly. All in all, without the recording of this tutorial, the entire panel of 200 rows took more or less an hour, 45 minutes, an hour to do. So it really doesn't take long. When you get to the end, just take care, make sure that all the stitches are down, and you carry on then in the opposite direction. I like to then knit one row, or it's recommended that you knit one row just to consolidate those holes, because you need now to fill in a stitch at each one of those stitches you've moved. Otherwise everything's just going to fall apart, you're going to have a drop stitch. So it's imperative you do at least one row. I'm just doing another 2 because I want to have a little bit more of a gap between the holes, between the pattern, the eyelets. So I go all the way back again, one solid row, and again when you get to the end, make sure that stitch is down, that it wraps over the edge, and we're moving back. So that's now going to be the end of my 3rd row, and I'm going to start again my pattern on the 4th row. This time I'm doing the alternating stitches, so it's stitch 9, 15, 21, 27, 33 and 39. Previously I did the other set. So again, it's very easy to see. I know from below where the hole is. That's the one that's corresponding to where I want to be. So as soon as I see that hole come up, I look above it, I see there's the black marker. I make sure that's where I stop. So I'm going to manipulate that stitch off the hook. As soon as the hook comes up a little bit, grab the yarn, pick it up over the hook, move it over to the next hook that's coming up, and slip it over. Simple as that. That's all you need to do, and that's how the pattern goes. So I'm just going to let you look a little bit further. I'll speed up the video in a moment just that you don't die of boredom. Because from now on it's plain sailing, it's just repeat. Skip 5 stitches, hook the yarn, lift it over, place it onto the next one, skip 5 stitches. That's for my pattern at least. You do your pattern. Great, we'll see you back when I've done. Then we can start assembling this project. Just as a tip, as soon as you see your work touch the table, you should start rolling it up into a ball. Obviously in panel mode it's not as easy to do a donut like it is when you are in circular mode, tube mode, but do your best. The longer it gets, the easier it will be. This helps you keep even tension, prevents dropped and tucked stitches, and just keeps the tension correct. So as soon as your work touches the table, just remember to give it a little bit of a fold. Okay, now what I have for you is just in real time. Obviously it's sped up a bit, I think 8 times speeder, faster than normal, just that you can see my process, that you can see everything I'm doing. This is from about row 81 onwards all the way up to row 200. What I'm doing, how I'm working, and as I said, it's really quite easy. It's only 6 stitches every 3rd row that we manipulate and move from one peg to the next. So just sit back, relax. You can obviously fast forward this if you want, but for those who are interested, you can see the entire project as I'm working on it all the way to the end. Every now and then you'll see I roll it up, put it back in the middle so that I have even tension all the way around. So I'm going to stop talking. You can carry on watching, fast forward if you like. Otherwise, we'll see you when I start assembling. Now when you get to the end, to your last row, now it's time to remove your working yarn out of the yarn feeder. Just chuck it in the middle, leave yourself a little bit of a tail for working in or crocheting the edge or whatever you want to do. And then we're going to add in our waste yarn, nice contrasting color so you can easily find the stitches later. We're just going to put the waste yarn in the place of the working yarn and give it a little tie on the end, because those end stitches can be quite a pain. So just make sure you tie your waste yarn to the working yarn. Just a small knot is fine, not a knot, just once. And then we're going to put on a few rows of waste yarn, however many you're used to or you're comfortable with. I do about 5 or 6, that's more than enough. And then we can securely remove the work from the machine and carry on processing. And now we have our panel of the machine laid out on the table for you to see. It's looking really swanky, if I may say so myself. I really like how the pattern has developed with the eyelet holes all over the place. I think it's going to look really quite nice. We're going to do the next panel and then we will start stitching the two panels together. I'm going to show you how to do that. And after that we'll crochet the ends and that should be it. There will be our shawl done. For those who are interested, I'm using Alula yarn. It's a DK yarn by L. It is 100% acrylic, 600 meters. The color is Falcon. Unfortunately, it has been discontinued, so I'm not sure if you're going to get it. There we have panel 2 done, and all we need to do is put them together. Let's go for it. So after you have lined your panels up, we're going to start by slip stitching the very end stitches along the panel together. This I find the easiest to get a very flat join. You're not adding any other yarn, so you're not adding any weight or bulk, and it does create a pretty little zigzag pattern all the way up between your two pieces. So you'll see a bit later, I zoom in, you'll be able to see that. So identify the very end stitch. It's easy to see with your contrasting yarn, and find the alternating edge stitch on the corresponding panel. And we're simply going to slip stitch those two panels together with your crochet hook. I'm using a 3.5 millimeter crochet hook here, and then we just alternate up, left, right, left, right, left, right, all the way up. It's very easy to find that very end stitch. You will see it's quite a long loose strand between two, let's call them bumps, where the stitches turn at the end of the machine. So between each bump you'll see a long piece of yarn. That's the stitch you want to grab. So you grab that longish stitch, you slip it over the one from the alternating side, and you just carry on slip stitching your way all along the project. Could actually not be easier than that. Here's just a bit of a zoomed in view of what I'm doing, so you can see a little bit closer what I was talking about. You'll see those little bumps. In between each bump there's sort of a loose piece of yarn, quite longer than all the others. Those are the holes into which you are slip stitching. They're quite easy to identify. It's a little bit tricky now on this yarn because of its color, but that's why I've got a contrasting background for you to see more clearly. But both sides on the very edge, you'll see there's a longish yarn between the bumps. Those are the ones you are going for. So it's very easy. You just slip stitch, pull that stitch onto your needle, hook it under the previous yarn, and go to the other side, hook up that stitch, pull it under the yarn on your needle, and so you go on all the way up until you've got to the very end. Okay, we've made it all the way up the panel. I'm just attaching that last slip to the waste yarn so that it doesn't unravel. And there we go, our two panels are now firmly attached to each other. They're not going anywhere. It looks really, really nice. Give it a bit of a tug. There's no bulge, there's no extra yarn there, and it suits the lacy pattern and the very fine yarn really nicely. You can almost not see it. So you see when I stretch it out, you'll see a little bit of that zigzag pattern in between. But other than that, it looks really, really smart. Now we're going to crochet up the edges, and that's also really quite simple. So let's get cracking. So all you want to do is identify your very last stitch. That's quite easy to find because you've used a contrasting waste yarn, and that's where we're going to start. So I just take my yarn that I'm going to be using to crochet up the edge with. I just slip it through that thing, loop over, and pull through. Quite as simple as that. Now I've got my first stitch. Now all we're going to do is go into every single stitch all the way along, pushing through, yarning over, pulling through both. Yarn over, pull through both. We go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both. I must excuse me for my terminology. I don't know if this is called a single crochet or a half crochet. I suppose it depends if you're in the UK or in America. I'm in Namibia, so for me it's just a single crochet stitch. If you have a different name for it, then that's what you call it. So if you see on your waste yarn, you can easily identify the very, very last stitch on your work. That's the one we're going into, very loosely pulling through because we want to have a nice stretch at the end, and this stitch gives a really, really nice stitch. So you just go through the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both. Go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both. And so we go on until you've reached the end of your project. And as we get to the end of the row, just insert yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both those last few stitches. Make sure that you identify the very, very last stitch in the row. Otherwise, when we take out our waste yarn, everything is just going to fall apart down that row, especially the very end row. It's quite a tricky one. So just find your very last stitch and make sure that you crochet into that very last stitch as well, just to secure your end nice and neatly. And there we go, there's my last stitch. In we go, tighten up, yarn over, pull through once, yarn over, pull through twice, and then I'm just going to pull an end off so that that doesn't unravel. So you see how nice and stretchy this crochet stitch is. Because it's quite a light shawl, we want to have a nice stretch at the end. I'm probably going to add another row of single crochet to this once I'm done, but you don't need to see me do that. Everybody knows how to do that. So now all we do is pull off the waste yarn. The cast on side is quite tricky. This is the cast off side, so it just pulls right out. No hassle, easy peasy Japanesey, and there we go. Out comes the waste yarn out of that section. The other one, because I twisted them around, is going to be a little bit different. As you can see, there's my nice crocheted edge, so the edge is sealed, none of the stitches are going anywhere. This side's a little bit trickier because this is my cast on side. So normally I put in a line, a safety line, before I put the waste yarn on, or let's put it this way, first put on the waste yarn, then you put on a line and then the rest of the project. So all you need to do is then pull that line out and this whole bit comes off. But nothing that can't be solved. We just identify where the stitch is and then you just pull out that very first row, and after that the rest comes out easy. And that's it. We've made it to the end of the project. Thanks so much for sticking around. I really hope you've enjoyed this. Here's just some end stills I've taken once we're completely done. Here's me wearing the project, the shawl. I still have to just work in the yarn tails, but I think it came out quite nicely. So I hope you try and make this. Come up with your own pattern, experiment a bit, have fun. It's only knitting. If you don't like it, you can pull it apart. And here's my end project, my shawl. Thanks so much. Take care. Like, share, and subscribe.